creation of the FSC. You had the repeal of the 1971 Insurance Act, and it was replaced with a 2001 Act, which was modern, which was based on sound insurance principles, or sound principles for insurance regulation. And so, it'll be interesting to see what happens in Trinidad. Already I know that there have been some powers that have been given to the insurance regulator, which happens to be the central bank in Trinidad, which they previously didn't have. And there previously seemed to have been some resistance to the regulator having those powers. But those were pushed through when it became apparent that CLECO and the Sale Financial Group was in serious financial trouble. And so typically what happens is that during the boom phase of the economic cycle, there's a lot of optimism, not only on the part of government, but on the part of businesses. That's the time when you're likely to find inappropriate use of leverage. And so short-term liabilities are used to fund long-term assets during that phase, because there's this belief that the values of certain investments, whether it be real estate or stocks, will continue to rise. And so you will always have an appreciation in the value of your assets, which more than covers the cost of funding. But the problem is that it inevitably creates problems for you down the road, because when your creditors, or your whether they be in the form of depositors or they be in the form of insurance policy holders that are holding insurance policy contracts that have an investment element, and those persons want to withdraw their money, and typically because there is some crisis in confidence, then you have a liquidity crisis, and then you find that assets have to be sold to meet obligations, and quite often the assets have to be sold at what we call fire sale prices, or in a distressed market. That's what happened in Jamaica in the 90s, and certainly that's what I think happened with Sale Financial. Derek asks, how have they dealt with the contagion risk in Trinidad? Well, they've tried to isolate those entities within the group that are sound, that are financially sound, and the government has either taken those over outright or have sold them to other operators. That's what happened with Republic Bank. Republic Bank was sold off. So it's an approach which has parallels with the approach that was employed by the Jamaican government in the 1990s, where you try to corral those assets which are still performing, and to sell those to an operator that has good credentials, that the regulators would regard as fit and proper, so that there can be some business can continue, and you realize that in Jamaica, that's what happened. A number of the insurance portfolios of the failed life insurance companies were sold to other operators, and in fact there was in terms of deposit-taking institutions, a bank was created called Union Bank, which was then sold to a bank from Trinidad. Colleen is asking if the PRI is in control of any of the companies. I'm really not sure, Colleen. Certainly the major operating companies, he would have relinquished control of those. But remember now, this was a very big group. The IMF paper speaks about there being in excess of 50 companies and affiliates spread across 28 countries. So I can't say with any certainty whether or not he has, the PRI has relinquished total control over all of the entities in the group, but it's certainly the significant ones: CLECO, BICO, Republic Bank. He no longer has any control over those. Let me ask you all this question. What do you think is the most important ingredient for an effective compliance risk management program? Dominic says pessimism, and I think that's an interesting comment, because pessimism would be the opposite of excessive optimism, and we've seen where excessive optimism has been the cause of a lot of problems, both in terms of at the micro level for organizations and also at the macro level in terms of the economies of nations and indeed the global economy. Benjamin Graham, who is was one of the foremost and renowned gurus in terms of the whole science of investing and the whole art of investing, had analyzed the Great Depression, what caused the Great Depression in the late 1920s and that went into the 1930s, and he said there were three things. One was excessive optimism. The other was inappropriate use of leverage, and the third was inadequate regulation. And I think in the recent global crisis, you see all three factors at play: excessive optimism, inadequate use of leverage, and inadequate regulation. Lisa says the buying of staff. Very good point. The compliance is sometimes seen as being just the only person who should really be interested in compliance is the compliance department, which is so wrong. Everybody has to understand how important compliance is, and they need to see the importance of compliance. And bearing in mind that when we talk about compliance, we're not only talking about you seeking to comply with the law and with procedures, but also you also looking at how do I deal with situations which are not addressed in the law and procedures, which means that you have to fall back on prudence, and you have to fall back on reason, orderly thinking. You have to fall back on ethics, the moral principles. And so, having a culture where the staff understand that compliance is everybody's business is important. And Colleen's point is that you need management's commitment for that. Management has to drive that process. Senior management, the board, they have to be champions for that. They have to talk the talk, but walk the walk as well. They need to make sure that the organization understands how critical it is to be compliant. asking a question here. What is the biggest challenge to effective compliance risk management? Love to hear your thoughts and views on that. Dominic says it's rapid pace of technological change. That is a big challenge. Dominic says the rise of money laundering via preloaded debit cards that has been seen in some jurisdictions. Technology does allow for that. We see the trend towards the use of more innovative means of delivering financial services. For example, the use of e-money and mobile wallets, whereby your mobile phone becomes a device which stores value electronically, and you are able to make payments. So you can do your bill payments via your mobile phone, and increasingly that is happening around the world, and innovation is good because use of innovative channels for the delivery of financial services allows for financial inclusion. So you bring the unbanked persons within the formal financial sector, and that is seen as a good thing in terms of alleviating poverty. But there are risks that are attendant with technological innovation. Dion points out that sometimes some functional units in a company move very slowly up the learning curve. Question is then, how do we address, Colleen also talks about sales team focus on growth at all costs. I've seen this. We can identify with that. Now, besides the rapid pace of technological change, some of the challenges you're pointing out have to do with attitude. How do you address the attitude? How do we, within our organizations, become very good salespersons in terms of getting the buy-in of staff, as Lisa points out, in terms of getting the commitment of management? How do we do that?